This is your daily dose of all things royal.
Would you think about becoming a citizen?
I have considered it,
Yeah?
Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. It appears that Harry might have inadvertently stuck his foot in his mouth. As I had originally broke this news about the Heritage Foundation getting the chance now on February 23rd to present their oral argument, it looks like they now will be including this interview that Harry did with Good Morning America in preparation for this motion hearing coming up, as filed by the plaintiff's lawyer, Samuel Everett Dewey. He writes, I'm counsel to plaintiffs in this action. I make this declaration to provide the court with additional information relevant to the motions hearing set in by this court for February 23, 2024. Attached hereto as Exhibit 1 is a true and correct copy of a Daily Mail article containing a transcript of a February 16, 2024 interview of the Duke of Sussex on ABC's Good Morning America, in which the Duke of Sussex discusses potentially seeking United States citizenship. As you can see here, this is the article that they submitted in Exhibit 1, and clearly the transcript is laid out, particularly the part where Harry discusses becoming an American citizen, right here.
Do you feel American?
Do I feel American? No, I don't know. I don't know how I feel.
Would you think about becoming a citizen?
I have considered it.
Yeah? What would stop you from doing it?
I have no idea. I'm here standing next to this with these guys, and the American citizenship is is a thought that has crossed my mind, but certainly not something that's a high priority for me right now.
Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say that what they're doing here is the right approach. However, the exhibits that were provided, Exhibit 1 and 2, were just compilations of articles stating the same exact thing that was said in this Good Morning America interview, of which Harry said that he considered becoming a citizen. There doesn't seem to be any type of indicator as to what is the intent of using this information now in this proceeding that's coming up on February 23rd. If I had to guess, they're going to try now to tie it back to Prince Harry's admitted mind-altering substance use in his book Spare and making it public everywhere, and then questioning his immigration form on whether or not he lied on it. Now, if that is the route that they're taking, do I think it's necessarily a strong one? Honestly, I think it could be stronger if they add in there for public interest, the fact that Prince Harry has been undermining the U.S. Constitution by participating in this censorship industrial complex. All the while, if he is under the influence of these admitted mind-altering substances, I think that's a double whammy for him to be deported immediately. If they're going to use this Good Morning America interview, then I think they should really maximize it and use this portion of it as well.
What's keeping you busy when you're out of the house?
Everything.
Yeah?
Everything in the house, everything outside the house. So no, look, the mission continues, and every element of the work continues.
When you listen to the language that Harry is using, the mission continues. What mission is he talking about? Could it be to come over here and undermine our constitutional republic by undermining Americans' First Amendment rights in being a part of this censorship industrial complex and suppressing Americans' freedom of speech online? Or how about participating in lawsuits that are challenging regulations that are being forced upon the American people to control the internet space? I mean, we can go on and on and on, as you know, and seen in my previous videos. And like many of you who are listening to this that are American, it is of public interest to know if Harry lied or told the truth on his application on whether or not he did drugs and what accommodations the government had given him, showcasing was he given special privileges because of who he is, and also highlighting the fact if indeed there were special benefits given to this guy and he was not held according to the law, then people need to know about that. Because if that's what the current administration is doing by favoring these globalists and elites, then we need to make the decision in November of 2024 if we want to allow this to continue to happen, because that's what we have right now in office. Also, we also have a professed drug user who has been interfering and engaged with our government on various levels, with our Department of Defense, with the censorship industrial complex, and trying to censor Americans by participating in the suppression of free speech. And this is what we have seen going on over the last couple of years with the people involved that Harry and Meghan are so tightly and closely aligned with, now being sued in the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit. So I think it's absolutely worth the public's interest to know if this migrant who's over here fleeing persecution from the UK, what his real intentions are in living over here. If he's not planning to become a citizen of the United States of America and give up his title, then why is he here? What is the point? What mission is Harry on that he needs to carry out over here that he can't do back in his own country? You hear what I'm saying? Part of this mission that he's on is potentially maybe the reason why he couldn't do all this work over in the UK is because Silicon Valley is here in California. And that's why he's here. I mean, their focus on targeting the youth and mental health and trying to get laws in place that do censor so-called hate speech and being the arbiters of truth and, cutting down on mis and disinformation and malinformation and the whole yacht of bullshit that they have been spewing the last 5 years, then I think that it's worth Heritage Foundation to start looking at that, to incorporate and ask the question, do you want a self-professed drug user who is now involved with our government influencing our freedoms and our rights? We last left off, I had mentioned that Prince Harry's involvement with the Aspen Institute and his contribution to that misinformation, disinformation report has influenced or become part of U.S. government policy discussions. And being that the taxpayer had paid money to the organization, in theory, Prince Harry was an actor of the state. Combine that with the scandal of Twitter suppressing conservative American speech in collaboration with our federal agencies. So in essence, our government was weaponized to attack Americans for expressing views that didn't align with their liberal leftist agendas. We can safely say that this was also going on at Facebook as well as YouTube. And being that Prince Harry and Meghan had acknowledged their involvement with influential people and policymakers from the private sector, I think it's safe to say that his access to various people in our government, the CIA with Rene DiResta, access to the FBI, and even CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. And considering what we know about those coordinated attacks against certain individuals who spoke out about his wife, there's a good possibility he had access to people's information. Again, I bring up the burning question is, how did Harry know about January 6th? I'd like to point out here that the Duke of Sussex had put on his Archwell website that alongside leaders from the public and private sectors, as well as policy experts, and the amount of lobbying that they were doing all over town, yeah, I too could see that this guy is actually an actor for the state. Prince Harry had been lobbying in 2020, so all of this going on with the election and hearing this come out of his mouth.
Jack and I were emailing each other prior to January the 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. That email was sent the day before, and then it happened, and I haven't heard from him since.
That was the same Wired event that Rene DiResta was also a part of. And I think that the Heritage Foundation could make a stronger case by emphasizing that the American people are being affected by this guy. Whether or not people know it or aware of it, they should be aware of it because of his involvement with all the various players who now are being called out for censoring Americans' freedom of speech. And I think that that case is a lot solid when you tie that with his drug use. Honestly, do you want a druggie who is influencing our government that affects your civil freedoms? No. And that is what needs, in my humble opinion, to be put forward as the driver to release this information. Because if we just say, oh, he didn't know, or this is what he was advised, guess what? Being that he has not been convicted before, nor has he been in trouble with the law around drugs, they're going to give him the pass. We know this. I mean, there are a lot of passes being given right now here in New York City. You could practically commit murder and you'd be given a pass. So I think the Heritage Foundation really do need to add in this civil rights and violation that him and his wife have been committing on censoring people's free speech online. We have many examples of them doing this and the players that they have been aligned with. I mean, it's well documented. I'm not sure why they are not bringing that forward or connecting the dots to make their argument stronger to compel the judge to make the decision in their favor. We do have a right to know what Harry put on his immigration form. You can redact some of the really personal stuff, but knowing whether or not he lied and he was given special privileges because of who he is absolutely something the American people should know, because nobody should be above the law. In addition to that, being allowed to be here to undermine our Constitution and it being allowed, that's a domestic terror threat, in my humble opinion, which showcases that DHS is not doing their job, or they have been supporting and encouraging it.
Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the
to
problem.
ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media? I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Which there's a truckload of evidence that supports the surveillance of the American people, initially being set up with this Disinformation Governance Board, to which Congress had shot down immediately. This is why this all needs to be exposed, because Harry was very much a part of all of this. And he's still actively trying to undermine it, but this time changing tactics and making mental health of children now the Trojan horse in to push policy and regulation in order to circumvent the First Amendment as well as the Fourth Amendment in invading people's privacy. This is what they want. You keep hearing them say, we need more transparency. We need the data. So the researchers want this information so they can see what people are saying, who people are talking to, and to be able, at the end of the day, to weaponize it. Even though the royals are supposed to be apolitical, Harry is still tied to the crown by being listed on that website. You can't make any mistake about it. Even in this lawsuit, it's listed as such, and that's how the United States see him. And in 2020, Meghan and Harry supported the Biden campaign, or supported the Democratic Party in aligning and doing work for Democratic organizations that supported Biden. I don't care what anybody has to say about it. Those are the facts. Now, I really hope that the Heritage Foundation has the full picture about this guy, because there's a lot more to this story than people are realizing it. And I hope that the Heritage Foundation understands that. I am very glad that they attached this new portion to the case around Harry thinking about becoming a citizen, because technically, if he admitted to doing drugs, then he would be inadmissible. Does it cancel DHS's position on not giving this information because we need to protect Harry's privacy? No, I don't think it really does anything because Harry hasn't started any process to become a citizen. And even if he does start the process to become a citizen, there's no definitive answer on if he'd be granted citizenship. So, it's kind of a moot point because it's all hypothetical. I really do think in order to get over the hump of getting rid of the excuse of protecting Harry's privacy, it more rests on the public interest and why it overrules Harry's privacy. It's because Harry is affecting our civil rights. So yeah, I could give a fuck about Harry's privacy. I want to know how the hell he's in this country and being allowed to do this while under the influence. I mean, I think that's a reasonable right that every American citizen who rightfully lives here should understand. I'm just putting that out there. But on that note, I'm going to leave you with an encore presentation of yesterday's video to drive home the point that Harry is very much a threat here in the United States and must be deported. And if Meghan really loves him, she'll go with him. And that is the best case scenario to give America some peace.
It matters. It's not really about trans swimmers or Black Lives Matter. It's about energy, food, water, and it's about the use of force. And so the number one thing you need to worry about in any country is the military. And we just don't have a history of worrying about the military, but we should be very worried about the military because that's where the guns are. And so if you wanted to take a continental sized country like ours with a population of 350 million people and you wanted to subdue them, you would need force. And so what was so striking about what Ben said was it's the DOD, it's the military that is censoring us, and they're doing it for political reasons. And that is a completely different thing from, say, the Democratic National Committee or even the FBI. The military has to be nonpartisan. It has to be controlled by elected officials, civilian control. So the voters have some control over the military. And conservatives, and it's such a wonderful and clever op on the part of the left, because conservatives just imagine the people who serve in the military are just like them. But the officer corps is not at all. They're like speaking at the Aspen Institute. They don't share your values. They hate you. They hate Christianity.
The defining fact of the United States is freedom of speech. To the extent this country is actually exceptional, it's because we have the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights. We have freedom of conscience. We can say what we really think. There's no hate speech exception to that. Just because you hate what somebody else thinks, you cannot force that person to be quiet because we're citizens, not slaves. But that right, that foundational right that makes this country what it is, that right from which all other rights flow, is going away at high speed in the face of censorship. Now, modern censorship bears no resemblance to previous censorship regimes in previous countries in previous eras. Our censorship is affected on the basis of fights against disinformation and malinformation. And the key thing to know about these is they're everywhere. And of course, they have no reference at all to whether what you're saying is true or not. In other words, you can say something that is factually accurate and consistent with your own conscience. And in previous versions of America, you had an absolute right to say those things. But because someone doesn't like them or because they're inconvenient to whatever plan the people in power have, they can be denounced as disinformation, and you could be stripped of your right to express them, either in person or online. In fact, expressing these things can become a criminal act and is. And it's important to know, by the way, that this is not just the private sector doing this. These efforts are being directed by the U.S. government, which you pay for and at least theoretically own. It's your government. But they're stripping your rights at very high speed. Most people understand this intuitively, but they don't know how it happens. How does censorship happen? What are the mechanics of it? But today we just want to talk about a specific kind of censorship, and that's censorship that emanates from the fabled military-industrial complex, from our defense industry and the foreign policy establishment in Washington. And that's significant now because we're on the cusp of a global war, and so you can expect censorship to increase dramatically.
You're such a fraud.